ask, and I like to ask this to the females that I speak to who have gone through divorce with children. Not that this what this podcast is about, but um, because that's a fear. That's a real fear that mothers have about leaving their spouses, their children. So, what were some of your fears that you had regarding your children in divorce? And what have you kind of done to help heal or mend anything that's been happening in your world with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fear because, everyone wants it feels better to live in comfort zone,
Hmm.
right? It's like, okay, it'll be easier to just kind of, live the rest of your life in this, not really happy place, but it's comfortable because, it's like a known devil is better than an unknown devil quote.
Yeah,
So, but at some point, um, you have to have the confidence to leave and say enough is enough. If you're at that point, I would not, suggest just kind of leaving just because he didn't do the dishes or something like
yeah,
that. But at some point, if you feel like you're being abused or you're, that person is really totally disrespecting you, and there's no way to really work on the marriage together, or it's just like a one-sided thing, then yeah, it actually is best for you to leave. And it took a lot for me to really get to a state of acceptance, because as a mom, you're like, okay, well, I got to keep the family together because that's what's in the best interest of the children.
yeah,
Stay together, stay together, stay together. But then I look at my parents' relationship, and I look at all these other, relationships where there was abuse from either party,
hmm,
and really, it's kind of like, is it really what's best for the children? Because you're just teaching them. Oh, just especially if you're a woman being abused, you're just teaching your children. Well, it's okay. Just take the abuse and just stick it out, and your needs don't really matter. You don't really have a voice, and just kind of go with the flow.
yep,
And I felt like at some point I really had to make that decision for myself. Like, you know what? I need to cut the chains. Like, this
yeah,
is, when I look at my parents' relationship and their parents, and and my husband's, I mean, I think our generation is put on this earth to really look at all of that and make different decisions than our parents' generations made.
absolutely.
And I kind of felt like I had to do that. I'm like, wow, like I have two girls and one boy. Do I really want to teach my girls? You know what? Whoever you find, you just got to stick it out. And regardless of how you're being treated, doesn't really matter. Oh, you have goals and dreams. It doesn't matter. Once you get married, your goal and dream is just to take care of the husband. And I'm like, that's not teaching them, positive values. And I'm also not
Exactly.
teaching my son. I'm like, oh yeah, when you get married, you can treat your wife whatever way you want, and she's just gonna have to take it. So I had to kind of put my fears aside. And yes, part of me still was kind of like, oh, it'd be a lot easier just to like go back.
Yeah,
Like it's just, I don't have to worry about all of this.
yeah,
But I know that's not the right thing to do, and I know, okay, I am going to feel a little discomfort and fear and anxiety in kind of breaking out of the cocoon and kind of branching out. But that's what change is all about. That's what your evolution is all about.
absolutely.
And for my kids, I mean, therapy, I mean, is kind of a must. Especially if they've gone through like a traumatic breakup with their parents.
Yeah,
And that's one thing I didn't have growing up because my parents were kind of in denial that I needed therapy.
yep, yep.
They're still in denial. They're like, "Oh, you didn't have a traumatic childhood." I'm like, "Okay."
Yep.
Well, the fact that I identify, they're like, "Well, your children are going to say they had a traumatic childhood." I'm like, "Yeah, and they are going through a lot of trauma right now. That's why I'm getting them help."
Exactly.
And they need
Exactly.
that help, support system at school, like if they can talk to counselors or establish some level of support there. And also whoever the parent that's kind of being the higher person, just sitting down with the kids, like as much hatred or resentment or anger you have about the other parent, not really voicing that to the children, other than to say like, look, at some point the children, like you said before, they know,
Yeah,
they know.
yeah,
Yeah, and they can see it too. So
yeah,
regardless of who's saying what, they can see it in action and
yep,
behavior, how they show love. and all of that. So I stopped kind of because I was really worried, like, oh my gosh, what is he saying about me? Are they gonna think like I caused this? But they know, like they've come to terms, and there's getting the therapy that they need. And I think as they get older, you can probably be more open with them
Yeah.
and explain things a little bit more in detail. But it is also, I know I've read a lot of the psychologists say, like, well, you should still show some form of like unison just as co-parents.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting because it's kind of like, well, unison comes when both parties are willing to show unison.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
So you can try your best and show that you're the bigger person here, and really you have to let go of the outcome. And
Yeah.
if the other person wants to be the bigger person as well, that's great. But if they don't, you can't really force them to be.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I think it's just there is a lot of fear and anxiety around it, but you have to really start thinking of not just your own needs, but are you really doing what's best for the children by kind of sticking with um, the family? And I would say give it all you got. I mean, I really felt like the last 2 years I tried every possible way of trying to keep things together.
Awesome.
But at some point, it you do have to make that call. Okay, enough is enough, and
Yeah.
it's time to you know move to the next level in your life. And if that person wants to come along, great. If not, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. Exactly. What steps have you taken to heal from the mindset that you previously had?
um a lot. I think it, like we discussed before, it's every level you get to, you take certain steps, you try different healing modalities. I mean, I'm always looking. I think the number one thing is changing your mindset to constantly learn and have different experiences, not feel like, okay, I'm done, I'm done healing, I'm done doing this, and that's it. So I think as you seek, the answers kind of come to you.
Yeah.
And then you have to also be very cognizant of what's actually going on and kind of come to acceptance to that. Because like I said before, like I thought, oh yeah, I'm completely healed, and I'm good. Like I've emotionally detached from my parents and from my husband, and nothing can really bother me anymore. But then I kept getting bothered. So some,
Absolutely.
a good friend had to call me out on that. Jothi, like, I don't think, you kind of really need to heal. And like, well, no, I'm healed. Like, I'm completely, this doesn't really bother me. It's like, well, it kind of is bothering you. And I'm like, no, well, is it? And sometimes it does take a third party to kind of
Yeah.
call you out on something, and it's up to you what to do with that information, and not feel like you have to defend yourself. Good friends are there to be a good friend, not just to
Exactly.
say, what you want them to say. And, um, so I think every time I get to a certain level, like there's a certain amount of healing. And then you kind of keep going along in that state until something else triggers you. Then you realize, like, oh, okay, I need to really, look into that and work on it. So I've tried,
Mhm.
I actually became a Reiki master. That was one of the first modalities that really helped me with the energy healing through the
Yes.
Japanese technique,
Yes.
meditations, qigong, which is another form of like energy. Um, I've also tried EFT, which is like emotional freedom technique,
Yes.
to really process things. So now I think my newest thing is the quantum healing hypnosis
Yes.
technique. So I think it's like the universe. Actually, through this whole marriage crisis, what I was able to really hone in on is this, like, my connection with spirit, universe, God, whatever you want to believe in, and just
Mhm.
knowing that that's there. And there's a higher power that always has your back, and sometimes you just have to surrender,
Yep.
and know that there is a bigger plan. Whatever's happening is for the best, because all of last year, like, I was trying all kinds of things to kind of keep the marriage together. Like, okay, he's gonna turn around, oh, he's gonna grow up, or he's gonna wake up from this midlife crisis or whatever he's going through. And it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Until somebody told me, like, Jothi, just surrender, just surrender to the universe. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, no, like I'm not doing that. Like, maybe the universe has a bigger plan for you, or God has a bigger plan for you, and maybe his role in your life is come to a close to a certain. I mean, you have kids; he's never gonna really go away, but his significant role maybe has come to a close in your life,
Yeah.
right? And maybe you need to. He's not meant to kind of travel the next chapter, and I actually really believe that everyone comes into your life at different times and they serve a purpose, and you serve a purpose in their life, and some are meant to go with you for like the long haul, and some are just meant to be in those particular chapters.
Exactly. Exactly. I want to read what Christy wrote here because this is interesting. Can you read that?
Sure. Yeah. So Chrissy says that's important that both parties need to show unison. And sometimes when one party will not be civil, then ties need to be cut, unfortunately. And that is very hard to deal with. And that's absolutely true. At the end of the day, you have to feel proud of your own decisions, actions, words, even. And, we're not perfect. I'm not saying that everything that came out of my mouth was absolutely golden and perfect. But you try your best. And, you can only be the higher person for so long. At some point, you have to do what's right for you and what you think is right for the kids. And if the other person is not showing unison or they're not being civil, that's really on them. And
Yeah.
I don't know who believes in karma or, hey, what goes around comes around, like that sort of thing. But it really does. And a lot of us, I know I did this. Like, I felt like, oh, he must be, or this person needs to be punished for what they did or what they said or how they acted. And really, at the end of the day, it's not up to me.
Yeah.
There is a higher source, and all of this will be balanced out and taken care of, probably in a much better way than you could have ever imagined. So it's really not up to us to make sure, like, this person, or we get justice because of this person faced their consequences or their
Yeah.
punishment.
Yep.
And a lot of us spend a lot of time with that. Like, no, I'm not going to give him this. Like, even if you're going through a divorce, like, no, I'm never going to agree to that. And at some point you have to check yourselves. Like, is it your ego talking, or are you really looking out for the children's best interest?
100%.
And if you have a good lawyer, I know they say like lawyers just want money. I mean, if you have a good one, I mean, I felt like I had a really good one who really kept me in check. They're like, Jothi, is this really going to matter like 10 years down the line?
Wow. Okay.
Like, and your ego's like, yeah, it will, yeah, it's gonna matter. And like, really? So let's just say you find somebody else, you're living happily, this is all like in the past, all you're doing is co-parenting with him. Is it really gonna matter? And I really had to kind of visualize that. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Right? And if the other person also has a good lawyer, that's the counsel they should be giving. Now,
Yeah.
going along with Christine's point, you might also find that they might actually have a good counsel, but their
Yes.
ego might be high enough that they're like, well, we don't care what our counsel says. Like, I'm paying
Yeah.
you, do your job, and just do what I ask you to do.
Good point.
And that could happen as well. So at
Good
some
point.
point, you just have to, if you're a nice person, I know, Sabrina, like, you're probably in the same boat as me. It's like, when you're just a genuinely nice person, you don't really think about being like in this fighting mode or like warrior mode,
It's very
because it's draining.
uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. It's just draining. That's just not your resting state. But
Yeah.
sometimes you have to put on that role,
Yeah.
because you're fighting for your children. You're not
Yeah.
fighting really for yourself, right? If you didn't have children, you got a divorce. Oh, it'd be like, oh yeah, just get what you feel is right and then get out of there.
Yeah.
But if you
Exactly.
have children, like, I had to kind of think to myself, like, okay, I'm not fighting for me. I'm fighting for my children. What is in the best interest of the children?
Exactly.
And at some point, you do have to release. And let's just say you end up at 50-50. Yes, as a mother, you are going to have those fears, like, oh, what is he going to do with the children when I'm not there? Is he going to shape up? Is he going to not feed them? But you kind of, at some point, you have to allow that. You just have to allow it and then
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah.
And my lawyer told me that too. Like, one of two things will happen: either the other parent's going to step up because they have to
Yeah.
as a parent, which is great, that's what you want,
Yeah.
or they're going to fall and crash. But you can't predict that for the other person. You can't say, well, I'm
Absolutely.
not going to give this to you because this is what's going to happen, because you don't really know what's going to happen.
I like
And
that. I love that you're saying that you can't predict it, because you can't.
and you can't predict what happens in your life too. I mean,
Good
part of
point.
it is, we're trying to establish all this control and power over a situation. Who knows what's going to happen in your own life?
Yep.
You know,
You're right.
right? So you might get a career boost, and now you're like, oh my gosh, but I have the kids like 80%, and I want this, but then do I not take my up leveling in my career, or so there's a lot that can happen. I mean, you never know anything that's going to happen, or you
Yeah.
could have a health crisis. And I know several friends that are going through that. Like, they got the divorce, they got more custody than their spouse, and then they had a huge health crisis.
Oh my.
And then so there's lots of battles after that. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, just kind of, again, surrendering really helped me. It's like, okay, I'm just going to surrender. Whatever is best is going to happen. And
Absolutely.
whatever is meant for you is never going to escape you. So if we're meant to keep it together, it would have happened. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to surrender to the fact that this is what's meant to happen now. Like, we were meant to uh, split at this stage in time,
Yeah.
and then whatever else. And but also to just keep yourself open to the new chapter, and like new love and new people and new experiences. It is going to take a lot of healing for you to really heal from this and process all these emotions, and then release them, and then be in that little bit of an uncomfortable state of like, oh, I feel like so open and vulnerable now. But
Yeah.
that's what's needed to allow in, like, new love or new
Exactly.
experiences.
Exactly.
Somebody just really quick, gave me an analogy that really sticks in my head. It's kind of like you have all of this, like, boxes and used toys and like all these gadgets, like, from your house that are just like old and doesn't work anymore. You're carrying all of this stuff
Yeah.
from like over the last 15 years, and then
Yeah.
the doorbell rings. And you open the door, and then it's like this Amazon guy with like a shiny new package, like, woohoo! I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. Well, but how do I even take it? Because I have all this, like, stuff in my hands.
Yes.
So at some point, you have to kind of release all that stuff, and
Yes.
quote unquote feel kind of naked, because they're kind of like, oh, I feel so empty, like, I'm alone, or I don't have anything. But then you have to be like that in order to be able to receive the new package, which is
Yes.
right. So, and people feel that from a mile away. Like, if you're holding on to emotional
Yeah.
baggage, and then you're trying to attract you know uh, new people or new experiences, they can feel like, you still haven't gotten over this.
Yep.
Or you
100%.
haven't healed, you haven't
Yep.
processed, and you say you're emotionally detached, but you're not.
Yep. I
So
totally get
yeah,
it.
yeah. So it's
Totally.
scary, but I think it's
Necessary. Yeah. It's necessary.